Thanks for checking out this video. So let's talk about Creepshow Season 3, Episode 2. If you didn't see my review for Episode 1, it is on here. I actually have an entire playlist on my channel for all the Creepshow stories reviewed. Well, all the episodes, which contains all the stories, plus a ranked list of them after Season 1 and after Season 2. And I will be doing another one of those ranked lists for Season 3 and then all of them as a whole together. So I've been working on that as I go through these. So let's talk about what Creepshow Season 3 Episode 2 has in store for everyone, although I cannot say anything about actual events or the plot of the stories, so just know that I'm going to speak about other things that will give you an idea whether you want to watch it or not. But I will say up front, I think this episode is better than the first episode of Season 3, in my opinion. So this one's going to be available Thursday, September 30th. Now, again, one of my big criticisms, I had this for the first one, is the creep isn't really used all that much in this one, unfortunately. And he's a really big part of what I look forward to with these episodes, like having like a cool kind of tie between or like an overall kind of tying the stories together. And he's barely in it. Like it's just a little bit of animation, which I like the animation. It keeps that kind of comic book feel. But I just, it just kind of, I need more of the creep. I really just need more of the creep, if for nothing other than nostalgia purposes. I'm just saying. So that, but one thing I did like is the integration of the comic book aspect is significantly better in this episode than it was in the prior episode. They used a good amount of, well, not a good amount, more of actual like comic book panels, especially within the context of moving story forward in each of the two stories featured in this episode. So that was well done. That is always nice to see. And you can tell that they do it to kind of like save budget, which is fine because they do it in a way that it still works. It still, stays with the story. It moves things forward in an interesting way. It ties it back to the EC comics that the original Creepshow was based off of, and it does. It doesn't disrupt the story. It doesn't take you out of it. So it's done well. So let's get into the first of the two stories for this episode, which is Skeletons in the Closet. This one's directed by Greg Nicotero, who also directed the following episodes or stories for Creepshow. Gray Matter, The Finger, Survivor Type, Twitterings from the Circus of the Dead, Shapeshifters Anonymous, Model Kid, Public Television of the Dead, Pesticide, Night of the Living Late Show, and Queen Bee, which that one was from the last episode. Now, written by Greg Nicotero as well, who the only other episode or story that he's written in Creepshow was the holiday special, which was a great one. Also, John Esposito was involved in writing this one, who wrote such things as Graveyard Shift, Tale of the Mummy, The Walking Dead webisodes, and as far as Creepshow stories, he wrote Model Kid, Night of the Paw, and Within the Walls of Madness. So he's done some good ones. Definitely done some good ones. The only real star from this episode is James Remar, which I will say it's great to see James Remar again. I enjoy his acting, and he is the best actor in this. He's been in stuff such as, my favorite of them, The Black Coat's Daughter. I love that film. Dexter, Horns, Hellraiser Inferno, Fatal Instinct, Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, and The Warriors, just to name a few things. He has a much larger career than that, obviously. I like the use of the comic panels in this story. They're used to cut budget, but it works really well, like I kind of already said. There is some rough acting and there is some rough dialogue in this, unfortunately. But like I said, Remar does a really good job. I think he kind of takes the dialogue that's not that great and makes it better, whereas the other actors just aren't that great of actors, so they can't do the same thing as Remar does, which is kind of take not that great dialogue and make it better. So it's kind of like a dual problem where like the acting's not that great, the dialogue's not that great, so it kind of. But I will say it is more of a problem in the beginning than it is in the end of the story because the story kind of like takes over with other things, and it's a nice reprieve, to be honest. It shifts your focus from the acting because in the beginning they're kind of trying to set up the characters, they're trying to set the stage for the story, so there's a lot more talking involved than the more action-ish related stuff towards the end, which is way more fun, obviously. There's a great nostalgia tie-in, which is super, super nice for horror fans with this. You get it immediately. Like, it introduces itself immediately, but it just keeps getting deeper and deeper into that, like, nostalgia thing. I want to call it a nostalgia pit in the best way possible, though. A wonderful nostalgia pit. You'll see what I mean. There's some attempted humor that's actually kind of cringeworthy, or as people would just say, just cringe. There is some humor attempt that is not so great, but overall, it's kind of like got this ridiculous campiness to the story that I actually think really does work well. So the trying to be funny dialogue, not so great, but the overall campiness and ridiculousness feel great. Works very, very well for this story in general. So once we get away from the missed jokes, it gets a lot better. This was a clever way to pull something off in the end that is a big wink to horror nerds, and you'll see what I mean when you get there. It's kind of like the treasure at the bottom of that nostalgia pit, and you'll see what I mean. I was smiling, I was grinning during it. I quite enjoyed it. It leans even further into the ridiculous at the end, but it actually kind of made me chuckle, and like I said, that ridiculousness and campiness to it worked in its favor. It really did. At first, when that started getting introduced, I didn't really know how it was going to go, but it works well. I enjoyed it. So I'm going to give this out of 5 stars with half stars in play a very nice and solid 3.5-star rating. This one was good. I did quite enjoy it. I do recommend it. Now, the next one is Familiar. Now, this one was directed by Joe Lynch, who's directed such things as Wrong Turn 2, Dead End, Chillerama, Knights of Badassdom, Mayhem, and the Creepshow series stories The Right Snuff and Pipe Screams. I did not like The Right Snuff. I did like Pipe Screams, but I will say that the directing and cinematography were not ever a problem. You know, I didn't like The Right Snuff, but directing looked really good and cinematography looked really good. It's just a story I didn't like for The Right Snuff. Pipe Screams, still good directing, good cinematography, and I like the story a lot more. And in general, good directing and good cinematography for this one. Actually, very good. So, to be honest, I would kind of like to see Joe Lynch do more of the Creepshow episodes. Just saying, I like his style with the directing. A lot of the films, you don't really notice the directing or the cinematography as much. Like, it seems more basic. You're just kind of like getting the story out there. But with his episodes, I feel like you notice the directing, you notice the cinematography. So I think that just kind of speaks to how good he is at it. Anyway, so I was very happy to see that this one is written by Josh Mallerman. Now, if you're like, I know that name, but I don't know who that is necessarily. He's the guy who wrote the book Bird Box. He's also written a bunch of very awesome books. I would recommend most his book Unburied Carol. I've read a few of his books. He's a very good writer. I really enjoy his stuff, and he wrote the story The House of the Head for Creepshow, which is one of my favorites. So I got really excited when I saw this. There are no big stars in this, though. I will note that. No big stars for this one. The ADR seems off in the beginning of this. That's one of my big problems. Very early on, I was kind of like taken out of the experience because the ADR was off. I did not like that. I don't think it was intentional. It didn't seem intentional, and there was no benefit to it, unfortunately, so not so great there. The story gets pretty intriguing relatively fast. It is an interesting story from the get-go. It's not like the prior one where it's like kind of rough and kind of stumbling a little bit in the beginning. It hits the ground running. You can tell it has a very clear vision of how it wanted to be set up, and then where it's, and that it is going to go somewhere. You don't necessarily see where it's going to go, but that it is going somewhere and really building towards something. So it's very put together. Solid acting. Also, the dialogue is good and the characters feel more developed than most stories in Creepshow. Actually, I think as far as characters and feeling realistic and feeling well developed, this is the story that does it the most of all the Creepshow stories for the Shudder series. I feel like that was one of the biggest strong points for this particular story, and I really enjoyed that about it. Nice practical effects. That's another thing. There's really nice practical effects. Well, a few nice practical effects moments in this one that really, really shine and play into the story extremely well. Like I said again, the directing really does stand out along with the writing. And this felt like an old school Tales from the Dark Side, and that it could also easily be turned into an actual feature film. Crazy. Like it had that quality to it where you're just like, I want more. I could see this being longer. I could see this being a feature film. And like I said, it has a very similar to feel to an old school Tales from the Dark Side. So that's a great thing. Really enjoyed this one. Out of 5 stars with half stars in play. 4 stars on this one. Really like this one. And to be honest, it made me kind of feel like I just want Joe Lynch and Josh Mallerman to work together on every story for Creepshow. It really did. Like, that's my opinion. Joe Lynch and Josh Mallerman, just have them do the entire show. Obviously, Nicotero is still the showrunner, doing the practical effects and everything. Like, do that. But yeah, Lynch and Mallerman did an excellent job with this one. Really enjoyed it. So, would love to hear other people's opinions on this when you see it. Go ahead and put some comments down there about it. We can do spoilers in the comments, so know that. There could potentially be spoilers in the comments, so go ahead. Let's get nerdy and talk about it. Do me a quick favor, hit subscribe if you haven't already. If you have already, thank you very much. If you have not, please take your time to do that. It is quick, it is painless, it costs you $0, and that's your way to thank me and keep me motivated to keep doing reviews like this, because that is legitimately what keeps me motivated. But anyway, thanks everyone for taking your time to watch this, and until next time, keep it brutal.